there are a couple models in the book, and one is the disruptive loop. And it just very simply, it's a very simple process, but basically says that what we found as we were studying people, you start to see it repeat time and time again. You go, okay, there's something here, there's a pattern here that we're finding. And what it is that when a disruption hits, instead of just reacting to something or ignoring it or hoping it goes away, these people tend to step back and discern.
Hello and welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Hodeling, FranklinCovey's head of product. In these conversations, we speak with many of the world's most respected leaders about the mistakes, methods, and mindsets that led them to become the people they are today. We hope that their hard-earned insights help accelerate you on your journey. Today's guests are James Patterson and Dr. Patrick Leddin. James Patterson is the best-selling author of all time, with over 425 million copies sold. He is astoundingly prolific, with over 100 New York Times bestsellers, including a Guinness World Record 61 number one bestsellers. He has co-authored books with Bill Clinton, Dolly Parton, Michael Crichton, and now he adds Dr. Patrick Leddin as his latest co-author on Disrupt Everything and Win, which was released today. Dr. Leddin is a Franklin Covey senior advisor on culture and leadership and the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of The 5-Week Leadership Challenge. Dr. Leddin was previously an associate professor at Vanderbilt University, where he led the Disruption Project. Before that, he was a captain in the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division and a senior consultant at KPMG. In today's conversation, we'll cover their unique backgrounds, the key models, frameworks, and stories from their book released today, the solution that we've partnered together to build, and more. To learn more about this new solution, Disrupt Everything, visit disrupt.franklincovey.com and complete your disruption assessment today. Dr. Patrick Leddin and James Patterson, welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership. I'm incredibly excited for today's conversation.
We're excited too.
We're great to be here. And Jim, I got first billing.
I did. I
Did you hear
heard that.
that?
It was really, that's a bad start. Okay, but we'll live with it.
I'm saving the best for last, we'll put it that way.
Thank you. Well done.
Yeah, I agree.
So both of you have fascinating and in many ways unexpected backgrounds that led you to where you are today. So I'd love to start with learning a little bit more about kind of who you are as people before we get into the book and the ideas and the experience. So maybe, James, I'll start with you.
Okay, sure.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background?
And it all relates to disruptions, because everything I've done is kind of because of disruptions, positive disruptions. First career, I was at J. Walter Thompson, which at that time was the largest advertising agency in the country. I was the youngest CEO of Thompson North America at 37 or something like that. And we also ran Hill & Knowlton, which was the largest public relations company. And it was all about disruptions. I mean, just a quick story. That when I first arrived at Thompson, I had no advertising courses, no marketing courses. You had to put a portfolio if you wanted to be a copywriter. And so I presented the portfolio, and then a week later I came in with a second portfolio, and a week later I came in with a third portfolio, and they hired me. They just said, okay, the portfolios are pretty good, and I had disrupted the hiring process in a good way. So that was the first career. And it was actually pretty much disruptions that got me out of it too. But then the second was, according to Little Brown, I'm the best-selling author in the world, and that was also disruptions. The one that people are most aware of is doing, 7 to 9 books a year, frequently with co-writers, which was also very unusual for people. But I've co-written with President Clinton a few times. Dolly Parton, I co-wrote a novel with. I'm about to come out with one from Viola Davis, and then probably what's going to be the biggest one of all is with Mr. Beast. So I've just finished a novel with Mr. Beast. So yeah, and it's always been about sort of breaking the rules in good ways, questioning things that need to be questioned, and that's what we're into now. We're into this age of disruption.
What led you from J. Walter Thompson, where you were obviously very successful, and it sounds like, given your interview experience, even back then, very prolific. What led you from that into being an author?
Well, it was just time. Somebody said you're lucky if you find something you love to do, and then it's a miracle if somebody will pay you to do it. I didn't love advertising. I was fine at it. I had good instincts for it, but I didn't really love doing it. Actually, talk about disruptions. I was on this was a Sunday, and I had to go back to New York to go into advertising. It was a beautiful Sunday in the summer, so I left the beach, and I'm driving back to New York, and the traffic on the Garden State Parkway was going at about 10 miles an hour. And on the other side of the parkway, about every 12 seconds, a car would go by, whoosh, and then whoosh, and then whoosh. And I listened to it for an hour or so. And this was a huge disruption. And it occurred to me, seems silly, but it really wasn't, that what I needed to do was get on the other side of the highway. I was going in the wrong direction. I needed to get out of the advertising thing, which I hadn't loved, and do more with the writing thing. At that point, I was doing well with the writing. So that was, and that's a lot, and that's what the book is about too. It's about helping you to make that first step. That really, and really, and you need to make it very quickly. The first step, and then after you make the first step, what's the second step, and what's the third step?
And I read your first book, Thomas Berryman Number, was rejected by 31 publishers. Yeah. And then you went on to win the Edgar Award for the best first novel by an American author. So tell me about where that persistence came from. What kept you going from rejection 2 to 31, and that ultimately led you to publish it and then move into as a career?
Well, I love to write. And I thought I was good enough. And some of the rejections were kind. They weren't, horrifying. And the rejections happened very quickly. But part of it is, if you have belief in yourself and you're not being, totally silly about it, you just keep moving forward. I mean, there's a lot in the acting world, a lot of rejection. People come out of nowhere. John Grisham's first novel got rejected by as many as mine did. It wound up in a very small publishing house in New Jersey, Time to Kill, and I think it's one of his best. But it didn't stop him. He just went on and he wrote to client after that. And that's another thing, once again, that we deal with in the book in terms of, getting past mistakes, failures, people not seeing, kind of how you fit into an organization.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and inspiring lesson about both your and John Grisham's first book. So all of our aspiring novelists out there, if you are bumping up into barriers, one day you could be James Patterson or John Grisham.
That's right.
So Patrick or Dr. Leddin, to move over to you, I'd love to hear, you also have a kind of non-traditional background into academia. You were an Army Ranger. I don't know how many professors were previous Army Rangers, but maybe tell us a bit about your journey and what has led you from, education into the Army and then into career as a consultant and now as a professor.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In retrospect, I feel very similar to Jim, although he's had tremendous success in his own right by light years ahead of what I've been able to do. But when I look at it, it's been so much disruption and jumping in and just making it happen. You're right. I spent most of my 20s in the Army as an airborne ranger, kind of running out in the woods and jumping out of planes. Then I came out of that and I jumped into starting a business and ran that for 12 years before we exited it through an acquisition. And then along the way, I picked up my doctorate and I was like, I think I want to jump into academia. So then the next 11 years I spent teaching business at Vanderbilt and running undergraduate business at Vanderbilt. And then one day I was teaching a class called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. And James Patterson, a Vanderbilt alum, joins the class and talks about the power of disruption. And by the time that class was over, I'm like, I'm going to jump into that. And it took a little convincing and working through the process and a little tenacity, I think, to make this thing happen. But we really latched onto something, studied for 3 years about how people are positive disruptors in the world, and produced something I think is going to be exceptional when it comes to helping people have an impact.
That was really important, Patrick. How many people you spoke to and.
Long form interviews. So like an interview like this, it goes on for an hour and a half or so, 350 folks, and they're unsung heroes to household names. So Will, from doing a podcast, 350 takes a long time. And then thousands of other people took surveys, to validate certain things, but really great team of students. The Chancellor of Vanderbilt got behind the project because he saw what this thing could do. And that process of studying people from MLB players to actors to all different people in walks of life to people you've never heard of before, but you will when you pick up a copy of the book, their stories, you start to realize, wow, there's people in the world that in the face of all sorts of disruptions can choose to do
and
something
testing it.
amazing.
And one of the things about the course in the book is obviously you get the expertise of Franklin Covey, which is really important. But in a way, your company or your team also gets basically Patrick and I as consultants, essentially, in terms of the book. Which it's kind of a nice hire, I think.
Absolutely. An amazing hire.
Yeah, when we were thinking about like how do we bring this thing out into the world, obviously the book's a huge part for us on this, but we also thought of who's a partner out there who could work with, who understands how to change human behavior at scale. And that's why we came to you all, Will, and struck up the conversation. It turned into, I think, a really amazing workshop.
What I said initially in that when I went to Vanderbilt to give the talk, right, Patrick? The first thing that I said was, are you living a good life?
So I'm curious, what prompted this topic for you, James? You're one of the most prolific authors of all time. You have, as you said earlier, the most purchased author in human history. I think your books have sold 400 million plus copies. And why do you settle on this disruption as the next topic to focus on?
Well, part of it was, when I was asked to speak at Vanderbilt, and I started looking back at my two careers and like what made it happen, and it was this positive disruption. And I, even then, which was a few years ago, I felt that was a force in the world. You could see it with Elon Musk and some of the people even back then. You just saw it. Disruption, I mean, in terms of the near future and as far as we can see, I mean, you're going to have a lot of disruptive leadership in the world. A lot of companies, a lot of teams, the government to some extent, governments around the world. Disruption is going to be just a part of our lives, big part of our lives. So that was, it struck me as important. And then recently, there's a language, it's not my language, but it's been guiding me for the last 3 years or so. And I think it's more important for most of the people listening, younger people, and even for college kids, which is my time here is short. What can I do most beautifully? And with this book, Disrupt Everything, Patrick and I, and it was really a primary thing for us, we just felt we could help people lead better lives and get through tough times.
So you mentioned earlier that you have collaborated with many famous people in many of your books. What was it like collaborating together? It's rare that when I speak with authors, I'm speaking with two authors simultaneously. So maybe I'll give each of you an opportunity to share an appreciation for each other. So I'll start with you, Patrick.
Whatever happens here.
Yeah, let me go first because he's going to have to think of a few minutes about what he appreciates about me. But what I appreciate about Jim is well, first of all, he's brilliant. He knows how people consume information. And when I would come with things, I'd come with a very academic lens sometimes. He'd be like, yeah, nobody's going to read that. Do it this way. So helping me kind of the craft of writing in that regard, but also just it's one thing to land on an idea and say, all right, we'll just crank this thing out and get it out to the world. It's another thing to say, you know what, we're going to invest years in studying this thing, and years and literally 9 months to a year just on the outline alone and revisions of the cover and just everything to say, you know what, it's not right yet. Let's just keep working on this till we can figure out how to get it right. He has taught me that really about the power of iteration and not settling for something.
No, and what I love, one of the things I love about Patrick is that he's very open. He listens, he recognizes things can get better. And that combination of Army Ranger and professor is a good one. Because you learn things from both those. You learn a lot being in the Army, and you can learn things in academic as well. One of the things that we did need to work on is to make sure that the language in the book communicates, because a lot of times academic or even business language doesn't really communicate. You listen to a lot of speeches and you're like, I understand what the person is saying, but I'm not moved by it because the language is kind of dead. So that was something we worked on. And with the book, I would say, there were, I don't know, at least half a dozen drafts of the book, maybe more than that.
I love that you touched on the combination of the academic and the kind of personal, emotional storytelling component of it. I think that's what really resonated with me reading this book. And for those of you listening, the book Disrupt Everything and Win is coming out this week as you're reading it. So make sure to pick it up at a bookstore near you or order on Amazon. In the book, there's a few different frameworks that you all introduce that I think are powerful, and you explain those frameworks through stories. The first is disruptive loop. So maybe if one of you could share just an overview of what is the disruptive loop and an example of someone, a case study, a leader from the book that you highlight that really represents an effective application of the disruptive loop.
Yeah, I'll take that one on. So there are a couple models in the book, and one is the disruptive loop. And it just very simply, it's a very simple process, but basically says that what we found as we were studying people, you start to see it repeat time and time again. You go, okay, there's something here, there's a pattern here that we're finding. And what it is that when a disruption hits, instead of just reacting to something or ignoring it or hoping it goes away, these people tend to step back and discern. They say to themselves, okay, where am I trying to go in life and how can this help me or my team or my organization? So the first step is discern. The second step is behave. They recognize to achieve something, you got to change your behavior or lean into your strengths. So we identified 16 behaviors through this. But the key part was that nobody had all of them, but some people had a couple of them and other people had another couple, and together they did really cool things. And then thirdly, the step around achieve. So it goes discern, behave, achieve. And achieve just shows the, if you go through iterations of trying things and in doing things, you can have a broad impact yourself, your relationships, your family, your team, etc. And then lastly is refine. So it goes discern, behave, achieve, and refine. And I guess one example I'd give is many people might be familiar with the company Harry's Shave. And Jim and I had a chance to interview both Jeff Rader and Andy Katz Mayfield. They're the founders of Harry Shave. Actually, Jeff Rader also founded a company called Warby Parker. And it's just like that. That story unfolds just like this. Andy goes into a store to buy some razor blades and realizes it's easier to break into Fort Knox. It's like disruptive. Like, why do I have to do this? And why do they cost $60 for blades? That was disruptive to him. All of a sudden, he's like, okay, what's going on here? I can get the blades today, but what can I do from here? He starts discerning the opportunities and realizes, we can blaze a trail. We can create a new company around this. He leans into his strengths, his behaviors. He also gets Jeff Rader, who's a friend of his, on the phone and says, can we do with razor blades what you did with glasses? And then the results are just phenomenal. And then refine, they just get better and just keep going through that loop. And what happens is, you talk about resilience, like I want my team to be more resilient. I want to be more resilient. You don't gain resilience by going in a workshop for 2 hours and saying, okay, by the end of this workshop, I'm going to be more resilient. You get it by going through iterations of dealing with disruption, learning, growing, getting better, and then doing it again and again and again.
And
So that's an
the thing
example I
of it
would
is
see if
sometimes
somebody went through that process.
you need the whole loop. Sometimes your company needs the whole loop, or your team needs the whole loop, or you need the whole loop. And sometimes you just need pieces. You just need, there's a book out now. Who's my friend? Change Everything. Help me out, Patrick. Mel
Mel?
Robbins. And
Yeah.
she has a book that sold 3-4
Oh,
million
incidentally,
copies.
Jim, really
So bad.
quickly,
Yeah.
incidentally, for the Jim, real quick, for the FranklinCovey listeners, there's an impact conference coming up that FranklinCovey is doing, and you and I are on the front end of it, and she's on the back end of it. So
But
people need
what
to check
she
that out.
does, and initially she was having some problems in her life, and she had a very simple thing that she figured out, which was almost like a rocket blast up, but it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get out of bed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, make the call for a job interview. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just that kind. So, and in terms of this book, sometimes it's the big ring, and sometimes it's a little thing. I think this is one of those things. It's good to keep it on your desk because as various things come up, you go, okay, what's the first step? What's the second step? First steps are so important for individuals, hugely important.
Absolutely.
How do you take that? Because that's where you, and then the second step. Sometimes you make that first step and you're like, oh, gee, I don't know, I don't know how to go next. And this helps you to make those couple of steps, which is huge.
That's exactly what he was just talking about there is exactly what happened through 3 years of working on a project like this, or 3+ years. You talk of the loop, and it's like, okay, there's research says blah, 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 and you build the loop around it, you explain the loop to people. It's very valuable. But like Jim said, we were also going through the process of people going, just give me the next step or help me with something along the way. So we really started to roll our sleeves up and say, what are some very deliberate but small things like that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 type of thing that you could do? Like, how can you own the day? Or how can you say the scary yes? And some of those things are all somebody needs that day to move.
And it isn't one size fits all because for certain people, certain things are going to really resonate with them and others won't. But if you get a book and 2 or 3 things resonate with, like Atomic Habits, I mean, there's one thought there and it's a good thought. There's several thoughts in this book that, that are useful on that level.
Yeah. You spoke, Patrick, about the second step in this disruptive loop of behave, and there's 16 positive disruptor behaviors. And this kind of builds on what you're saying, James, that not everybody is going to memorize or apply all of these behaviors. I'm curious, you both are very successful disruptors yourself. Which of the 16 behaviors do you most personally identify with?
I'm going to name Jim's. I'm going to tell you what I think
Great.
his is, and he'll tell me if I'm wrong. I think the one around your gut, trusting your gut. Jim has great instincts. And I remember asking him earlier on, I said, "Do you think everybody has a great instincts?" He's like, "Absolutely not."
Yeah, no, it's crazy. But part of it with me is I just question everything. I used to do some work with Apple, and one of the things there was they were huge on skepticism and really negative on cynicism. Cynicism's poison. So I question things, but not in a cynical way, but in a skeptical way. Does this make sense? If it doesn't make sense, like as I said in the book world, the rule was one book a year, whatever, and bring it out the same month. And I just went, I don't understand that. What's the logic there? It doesn't mean it's wrong, but I just want to understand it better. With Mr. Beast, I just want to understand how that works. He talked about instincts. He's 27 years old. He's a billionaire now already, and his instincts are spectacular. He's one of the most impressive people I've met. Didn't really go through college. Could have gone through college easily, but his instincts are great. And this book helps you whether you have good instincts or don't. It'll help you either way.
What is the project?
Yeah, I think if I were to chime in, Will, if I was to chime in on mine really quickly, and I'm sorry
No, of
if I
course.
stepped on you there, but the other part about which one do I think I have pretty well? I think the one I have pretty well is there's one called Let Go of Good to Get Better. And I'm pretty good at that, like realizing, there's a bigger opportunity. I love Vanderbilt. I love teaching at Vanderbilt. I left Vanderbilt
But
for
all
this project.
companies need
So
that
to me, that was
notion.
like a
I
let go
can't
of good.
imagine. Patrick and I have this notion that I can't imagine a company, large or small, or a team where this wouldn't be useful for them. And part of it is just that, because you have to keep getting better. Even to stay where you are, you have to keep getting better.
Absolutely. The third framework that I want to introduce that comes out of the book, the third model, is the 4 fundamental facts that every leader needs to know about disruption. And that was another really important sticky point of the book. So maybe, Patrick, again, could you maybe speak a little to what those 4
Yeah.
facts are? And is there a story that exemplifies one of the facts?
Yeah, so there's 4 very quickly. The first one is the idea that the status quo will not stay the status quo. We call it the status quo is a deceptive little devil. It's just not going to stay that way. If you like it the way it is, enjoy the moment, but don't try to bury your head in the sand. The second one is that's okay because you're wired to disrupt. You have big brains that can do cool things. You have experiences, you have resources you can lean into. The third one is relationships in life provide headwinds and tailwinds, whether they're the ones around your dinner table, if you even have one these days, or around the conference table at work. And the idea that you can help people out, or you can hold them back, and they do the same to you. And we want more people helping each other out. And then the fourth one is your time here is finite. Make it count in ways that matter. And the one I think of, and actually in the process of building the course with FranklinCovey, Jim and I made a video that I think just is an awesome way of telling the story. It kind of feels a little Jason Bourne-ish, but you have Jim starting out saying, "Let me tell you a story, not about the hero, about the villain." And he goes through essentially talking through those 4 things, starting with the status quo. It's very compelling. As far as somebody who I saw kind of lived these out pretty well, there was a guy who we interviewed and then subsequently ended up in the book, named Tom Dieri. He lives down in Florida. People can look him up. He owns Rising Tide Car Wash. But he was graduating college at 22, was looking to go out and start a career. He had all these big ambitions. But at the same time, he was concerned about his 20-year-old brother on the autism spectrum. And he's like, what's my brother going to do? He ended up visiting his school and talking to his own dad and said, what can we do? And it disrupted him to the point where he's like, I'm not going to pursue this. I'm going to do something with my brother. And fast forward to today, they have 3 car washes. They're extremely productive, extremely successful. Of the 100 employees, 90 of them are on the autism spectrum. And Tom would tell you he's exactly where he's supposed to be. That's the idea of like, I recognize my time is finite.
If
I got
I
to
had
make
a
it count.
5th one to add for leaders, I would say take care of your people and they will take care of you, which I think a lot of leaders or groups don't do as well as they could. And it certainly has been a thing for me. And it's why, I've never had an argument with any of the co-writers. It's always been, I'm very open to their ideas. But I really think that's a huge thing, and in some companies it could be better.
And Will, actually, what he just mentioned there, we worked on this project for over 3 years. We never talked about like what would the quote unquote deal look like. We just worked on the project for 3 years, and I knew just from working with him it was going to work out just fine, and it did. Worked out great.
Building on that, you are a master collaborator, James, in that you've worked with so many of these incredible co-authors writing all these very successful books. This is your first, I think, book in the kind of leadership category around disruption. If you were to write a follow-up focused on collaboration, what are some of the secrets to successful collaboration from your partnerships?
I actually wrote a book for fathers, which is really for young men recently, the number one dad book, How to Be a Better Dad in 1 hour. And it wasn't a gimmick, because for a lot of these young dads, they're not going to read the 400-page book. So this was how do we condense all that information, because to me it was just a huge thing to start reaching out to a lot of these dads and say, we're with you, here are some ideas, here's a lot of stuff. And that was another one where I interviewed a couple hundred people to put that together. So not strictly a business book, but a good for the world book, which, as I said, that's part of it, was disrupt everything for me. And I think that's one of the reasons that you guys joined up with us, because that's a similar goal that we have.
Absolutely. So on that front, as Patrick alluded to earlier, we have partnered with James and Patrick to create an amazing solution based on the ideas from this exceptional book. The solution is called Disrupt Everything, Innovate for Impact. Maybe Patrick, if you could just share a little bit about what is this, what is the course, what does the solution look like, and who is it for?
Yeah, so it's for leaders and team members, but definitely for people who are dealing with disruption, which is, as Jim said, everybody. And essentially, it's broken down into 3 90-minute sections. The first 90-minute section kind of tackles the part about, hey, life is changing, it's being disrupted. Guess what? You probably have one. So why don't you write it down and let's do some work on it. And in that first session, people start to reframe it to say, I don't need to avoid this. There might be some fertile ground here to do something cool. The second section then goes, all right, let's talk about, you're going to do this with other people. So what are your behaviors? What do you do well? What do your teammates do well? And how can you leverage those to do some amazing things together? And then the third section, the third 90-minute section, has to do with the achieve and refine step, which basically gets into what's your vision for what you could do with this? Where are the obstacles you're going to run into? And no joke, where could you test this thing at? And I had a chance to sit through when FranklinCovey was doing some of the betas. And interesting, I think, is that when we ask people to think about a disruption they're dealing with, it took a nanosecond for people to think about the disruptions in their lives. And then to say to them, you know what, there could be something cool in that, blew some people's minds away to think about it differently. But by the time they got to the end, all of a sudden they were like, here's what I could do to tackle this. Here's what I could, and other people were helping other people say, here's what you could do with it. So I think it's really amazing, because in today's world, the course that Jim was talking to at Vanderbilt that I taught was called Leading Business Through Times of Crisis. And in today's world, when a crisis hits or a disruption hits or curveball gets thrown your way, everybody can't wait for the leader to tell them what to do. Everybody needs to go, okay, I've got a network of people here. We've got a purpose and a vision we're trying to achieve, and we can figure this thing out.
And there are two sides. Part of it is what do you do in crisis, and the other thing, how do you take advantage of opportunities? And sometimes crisis or bad times is an opportunity, big opportunity. But and the other thing of it is whether it's a big corporation, small corporation, or a team, you need to have a good mission. This will help you if you need it to help you refine the mission, if that's impressive. But to make the mission work, you must get buy-in. And to get buy-in, that means people must not just change, but disrupt. Change happens slower. Usually it's a gradual thing. Disruption is, and that's the way the world is now, it happens very quickly. Boom, there it is. Everything changes. Tariffs, boom, everything changes. AI, everything changes. There's just so many things right now, and part of it is just not to be scared of it, but also not to stick your head in the sand, because it's coming. It's one of those things like we live in Kansas, we know that the tornadoes come, and we have a storm cell, and we have to use it, and we have to enjoy the day if there's no tornado.
Yeah. One of the biggest disruptions in our lives in the last 20 years was the rise of the internet. I think back in 2013, you took out an ad in Publishers Weekly saying, who will save our books, our bookstores, our libraries? I'm actually going to read some of the copy from that ad because I think it's really powerful. You said, if there are no bookstores, no libraries, no serious publishers with passionate, dedicated, idealistic editors, what will happen to our literature? Who will discover and mentor new writers? Who will publish our important books? So I thought it was a really powerful message. We're now living through a second disruption, which is AI. What do you think happens to literature in the age of AI?
We really don't know. And anybody that sits up here and pretends that they know what's going to happen with AI is questionable in my mind. It's like you remember, like when I was at Thompson, the internet was just hitting. We didn't really know exactly what was happening. You knew it was important. We knew there'd be changes, but it's hard to tell. I'll give you this one, just a funny notion in terms of AI. Patrick knows this one, but the Eagles, there was one really crazier than ever. It wasn't Henley, but do you remember the guy's name? At any rate, but he would go out on the road and just be a crazy person. And they asked him, what the effect of disruption would be on music. And he said, look, until disruption can come in, destroy a hotel room and throw the television into the swimming pool, I'm not going to worry about disruption's effect on music. We're a little bit there. But it also was very smart about the fact that, AI will not automatically be able to think of the crazy things that humans think of. And they won't, necessarily be out there and create great music. We'll see, TBD. But nobody knows right now.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people worried, concerned about AI, which focus on what you can focus on. Focus on what you can do.
Worry
I was
does
actually
not help.
talking
Worry
to somebody
does
not that long
solve
ago.
any problems. Worry is a
Yeah.
waste of time. Worry is the worst. I can't tell you, and you see it too, how many damn meetings there are about worrying. No, what are we going to do? No, that's not useful. I mean, if you have a plan, what's a plan? Here's a plan that we're going to, that's good. But the worrying thing, I mean, it's just always, it's one of the things that President Clinton and I talk about all the time, which is if you can't do something about a particular problem, don't ruin your day. If you can, do it. Do it. And this thing, this is really about doing it. Yes, it's coming. Yes, disruption is happening. Let's do something. Let's be proactive.
We were actually talking to, as we were working on the project, we were actually talking to somebody specifically about AI who expressed a concern that, AI is going to take my job away. I do a lot of writing in my company, and my CEO is using, ChatGPT to produce things, writing his own script, if you will, or his own presentation off that. And I said to him, do you see a way in a world of AI you could be more valuable, not less valuable to your company? And he thought about that for a few moments, and he's like, yeah, I think so. And it's like, okay, which of these roles that we talk about in the book do you need to take on, and where do you need to go from there? And that's a little example that I think will be really helpful to people to realize, like, okay, all this might be going on, but you have agency. You can do something
There's
in
the
that
first step
moment.
and the second step in
And
that particular, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talk to people who deal in the book who went through things you would not wish on your worst enemy, Will, but they still figured out how to do something. And we're not Pollyanna, we're not burying our head in the sand, but we're saying, like, things happen in life and you have to figure out how to move through it. And we're going to, hopefully these stories will both inspire, but also you can connect directly to them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for joining today. I want to close with the final question we asked to all of our guests, which is, FranklinCovey is a leadership company. And so I would love to hear from both of you, who is a leader that you have worked with over the course of your career that has really inspired and guided you? What lesson can we all take from them? Maybe either of you are welcome to start.
Yeah. No, coincidentally, my name's Patrick, and I worked with a guy named Patrick years ago. He was actually a client of mine at my company. And I didn't report directly to him, but he signed off on my invoices. So he was pretty darn important in my world. But he was just a leader that I would follow anywhere, Will. And it was funny, at the end of a 12-year run, he was a client of ours for 12 years, and we sold the company off, and he stayed with the company that bought us. I went out to dinner to thank him for just that long, 12 years of working with us and letting us support him. And his response was just so genuine. He's like, why are you thanking me? I should thank you, because look what you did for our team and our organization. And I'm not saying that I did great things for the team and organization, although I think I kind of did. The point was, he was humble enough to go, no, this was a partnership. And I think partner's a really powerful word. So if I can find a leader that I can partner with, that's
I'll
huge.
give you an unusual one, Will, which is my grandmother, who only went through the 6th grade. She was a brilliant, small town, upstate New York. And she basically said to me, she said, you can be anything you want to be. You can do that. She said, you're not going to play in the NBA. She said, you don't go to your left very well. I could dunk in high school, 11, but she said, you don't move to your left.
Very impressive.
But she, and she had lines like, hungry dogs run faster, which has always driven me, and just go chop some wood. Just go chop some wood. Just go out there and do it. Don't waste time. Go on out there and do something positive. And she's driven me through my whole life.
Well, you would undoubtedly have made...
In a good way.
Absolutely. You would have made her very, very proud. You have chopped a lot of wood over the course of your illustrious career. So wonderful. So for those of you listening who are interested in disruption, who are interested in this incredible book, as I said earlier, please go buy it on Amazon or support your local bookstore, buy it there as well. If you want to bring disruption to your company, you can bring this new amazing solution, Disrupt Everything, Innovate for Impact. You can go to our website, disrupt.franklincovey.com. On there, we have a little self-assessment that you can complete that kind of gives you a disruptor profile. It's a really interesting, quick experience to go through. We are also hosting the Franklin Covey Impact Conference. It is a free virtual conference that is coming up in November, and Patrick and James will be keynotes along with Mel Robbins, as referenced earlier. So if you go to impact.franklincovey.com, you can sign up to join the Impact Conference and hear more from them then. So thank you both so much for taking the time
You'll
today.
love the Impact. You'll love it. It's really cool. And Mel is great. She's actually one of the best. Will is great, and Mel is a terrific interviewer and interviewee.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for joining, and thank you so much for partnering with Franklin Covey. This is such an important topic that in this era of uncertainty, of AI, of tariffs, of kind of a changing economic environment, disruption is so important for all of us, both personally and professionally, to navigate. So we appreciate your wisdom and insights.
Thank you. Thank you.
For all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another week of Franklin Covey on Leadership, and we hope you'll come back and join us again next week for another conversation.